If you're a fan of horror stories, then you need to hear about Anatoly Moskvin's terrifying secret. This is not just a tale of a man with a dark hobby, it's a story that delves deep into the macabre and the unthinkable. Anatoly Moskvin, a seemingly ordinary historian, harbored a secret so chilling that it would send shivers down anyone's spine. His story is one that blurs the lines between fascination and horror, between love and obsession. In 2011, police entered Anatoly Moskvin's apartment and made a chilling discovery. The authorities were initially investigating a series of grave desecrations in the area, but what they found inside Moskvin's home was beyond their wildest nightmares. The dimly lit apartment was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards and the distant hum of a music box. 26 life-sized dolls, eerily lifelike, dressed in children's clothes. These dolls were not the kind you would find in a toy store. They had an unsettling presence, their glassy eyes seemingly following you around the room. Each doll was meticulously crafted, with attention to detail that was both impressive and horrifying. The dolls were arranged in various poses, some sitting at a table, others lying in bed, creating a scene that was both domestic and deeply disturbing. But these weren't ordinary dolls. They were made from the bodies of undead children. The realization hit the officers like a ton of bricks. The dolls' faces, hands and feet were not made of plastic or porcelain, but of mummified human remains. The skin was leathery and discolored, the eyes sunken and lifeless. It was a grotesque parody of life, a macabre art form that defied all sense of decency and morality. Anatoly, a historian and grave robber, exhumed the bodies from local cemeteries. Under the cover of night, he would visit graveyards, armed with shovels and other tools, to dig up the bodies of recently deceased children. His knowledge of history and cemeteries gave him the expertise to locate the graves of young children, whose bodies he believed he could preserve and transform into his dolls. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a calculated and premeditated act that he carried out with chilling precision. He dried them with water and soda, sewed them into doll-like figures, and inserted musical boxes inside. The process was painstaking and methodical. He would carefully clean and dry the bodies, using a mixture of water and baking soda to preserve the skin. Then he would sew the bodies into doll-like figures, dressing them in children's clothes and adding wigs to give them a more lifelike appearance. To complete his creations, he would insert musical boxes into their chests so that they could play children's songs, adding an even more eerie element to his already grotesque dolls. Some dolls mimicked drinking tea, others appeared to be sleeping. Anatoly would arrange his dolls in various domestic scenes, creating a twisted version of a child's playroom. He would set up tea parties, with the dolls posed as if they were drinking tea and engaging in conversation. Other dolls were placed in beds, tucked in with blankets, as if they were sleeping peacefully. These scenes were a disturbing attempt to recreate the innocence and simplicity of childhood, but they were tainted by the macabre nature of the dolls themselves. One doll even whispered, "Dad, I love you." This particular doll was one of Anatoly's most prized creations. He'd gone to great lengths to make it as lifelike as possible, even going so far as to install a mechanism that allowed it to whisper phrases. The doll's voice was soft and childlike, but the words it spoke were chilling. "Dad, I love you," it would whisper over and over again, a haunting reminder of the twisted love that Anatoly felt for his creations. Why did he do this? This question has haunted everyone who has heard Anatoly's story. What could drive a man to commit such heinous acts? Was it madness, or was there something deeper at play? To understand Anatoly's motivations, we need to delve into his past and his psyche, to uncover the events and experiences that shaped him into the man he became. Anatoly claimed he loved children and couldn't bear to see them die. He had always been fascinated by death and the afterlife, but his obsession with children was something that developed over time. He would often visit cemeteries, not just to rob graves, but to pay his respects to the deceased children. He would bring flowers and toys and spend hours talking to the graves, as if he were communicating with the spirits of the children. In his mind, he was not desecrating their graves, but giving them a second chance at life. Denied the chance to adopt, he felt this was his only way to have children in his home. Anatoly had always wanted children of his own, but his attempts to adopt were repeatedly denied. He was deemed unfit to be a parent, and this rejection only fueled his obsession. He began to see his dolls as his children, and his apartment as their home. He would buy them toys and clothes and spend hours playing with them and talking to them. In his mind, he was not a monster, but a loving father who was doing his best to care for his children. He sang to them, told them stories, and organized tea parties. Anatoly's interactions with his dolls were disturbingly normal. He would sing lullabies to them, read them bedtime stories, and organize tea parties where he would serve them tea and cakes. He would talk to them as if they were real children, asking them about their day and telling them about his own. These interactions were a twisted parody of parenthood, a macabre attempt to recreate the bond between a parent and a child. His twisted love turned into a horrific obsession. What started as a desire to care for and protect children became an all-consuming obsession. Anatoly's love for his dolls was not just a hobby, but a way of life. He would spend all his time and money on his dolls, neglecting his own needs and responsibilities. His apartment became a shrine to his obsession, filled with dolls and the tools he used to create them. His friends and family began to notice his strange behavior, but they had no idea of the horrors that lay hidden in his home. Anatoly drilled holes under their eyes, implanted music boxes, and played children's songs. The process of creating his dolls was both gruesome and meticulous. He would drill holes under their eyes to insert the mechanisms for the music boxes, and carefully sew the bodies to create a lifelike appearance. The music boxes would play children's songs, adding an eerie soundtrack to his already disturbing creations. These songs, once innocent and joyful, became haunting and sinister in the context of Anatoly's dolls. He believed he was giving them a new life. In Anatoly's mind, he was not desecrating the bodies of deceased children, but giving them a second chance at life. He believed that by preserving their bodies and creating his dolls, he was allowing the spirits of the children to live on. He saw himself as a savior, a protector of the innocent, who was giving these children the love and care they had been denied in life. This delusion was a key part of his twisted psyche, and it drove him to continue his horrific acts. But the truth was far more sinister. Anatoly's actions were not just the result of a misguided sense of love and protection, but of a deep-seated obsession and a complete disregard for the sanctity of human life. His dolls were not just lifeless objects, but the remains of real children whose lives had been cut short. The horror of his actions was compounded by the fact that he saw nothing wrong with what he was doing. In his mind, he was not a monster, but a loving father who was doing his best to care for his children. The court found him guilty. When Anatoly's actions were finally discovered, he was arrested and brought to trial. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and it didn't take long for the court to find him guilty. The trial was a media sensation, with people from all over the world following the case. The details of his crimes were so shocking that they seemed almost unbelievable, and the public was both horrified and fascinated by the story. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, Anatoly was sent to a psychiatric hospital. The public was horrified. After his conviction, Anatoly was diagnosed with schizophrenia and deemed unfit to stand trial. He was sent to a psychiatric hospital where he would spend the rest of his life. The public was outraged by this decision, believing that he should be punished for his crimes. Protests were held outside the hospital, with people demanding justice for the children whose bodies he had desecrated. The sight of those dolls made people faint. The images of Anatoly's dolls were so disturbing that they caused physical reactions in those who saw them. People fainted, vomited, and had panic attacks at the sight of the dolls. The lifelike appearance of the dolls, combined with the knowledge of what they were made of, created a sense of horror that was almost unbearable. The dolls became a symbol of Anatoly's twisted mind, a reminder of the horrors that can lurk behind a seemingly ordinary facade. Parents of deceased children were outraged, their grief compounded by this grotesque violation. The parents of the children whose bodies had been used to create Anatoly's dolls were devastated. Their grief, already overwhelming, was compounded by the knowledge that their children's bodies had been desecrated in such a grotesque manner. They felt violated and betrayed, and their anger was directed not just at Anatoly, but at the authorities who had failed to protect their children's graves. Anatoly's parents faced relentless backlash. Anatoly's parents, who had no knowledge of their son's actions, faced relentless backlash from the public. They were harassed and threatened, their home was vandalized, and they were ostracized by their community. They were seen as complicit in their son's crimes, and their lives were forever changed by the actions of their son. They were left to deal with the shame and guilt of being associated with such horrific acts. Angry parents vandalized their home, cursed them, and scrawled hateful messages. The anger of the parents of the deceased children was directed not just at Anatoly, but at his family as well. Their home was vandalized, with graffiti and broken windows, and they were subjected to verbal abuse and threats. The hateful messages scrawled on their property were a constant reminder of the horror that their son had caused, and they were left to deal with the consequences of his actions. The world was left in shock, haunted by the eerie dolls and the twisted mind behind them. The story of Anatoly Moskvin and his dolls left the world in shock. The images of the dolls, with their lifelike appearance and macabre origins, haunted the public's imagination. The story was a reminder of the horrors that can lurk behind a seemingly ordinary facade, and of the twisted mind that can turn love into obsession. It was a story that would be remembered for years to come, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can exist in the human soul.